Yo, 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 what is going on, guys? We are back with my 2025 Week 7 tight end rankings. If you've not been here before, my name is Tyler. I'm part of the FF Mediators here on the Fantasy Face Off Sports Network. So, without further ado, let's jump into some rankings. First off, before we get my graphic pulled up here, I do want to go ahead and tell you the two teams we have on bye this week are the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. So, Dalton Kincaid, who was out last week after I believe it was a hip injury, he will not be on these rankings. And then you also won't have the likes of Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely either. Another thing to keep in mind next week, week 8 is a huge week for bye weeks. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Raiders, the Lions, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, and the Rams. Those will be all of the bye teams next week. So something to kind of prepare for as you're going through your waiver process this week. Maybe if you need to stash a tight end for next week that you may need to play, we'll end up seeing how it plays out. But just be aware of the bye week coming next week. But without further ado, we'll jump into my rankings here. And in my tier one, you'll see I have Trey McBride. McBride has moved back up to my tight end one on the week here. They do play Green Bay this week, who is the 28th best defense, or I guess that would be the fourth or fifth worst defense against tight ends. Finished last week with 8 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. Jacoby Brissett looked competent, right? Like he made this offense go, especially against that Colts defense. You know, it was a whole lot closer than I really needed it to be. Had me sweating some bullets there, but my Colts pulled it out. Another thing to mention too was Trey McBride. Marv is in concussion protocol. Now, he went out early in that game last week after slamming his head down pretty hard. He missed the rest of the game. I believe he only played about 23% of the snaps, somewhere in that ballpark. He was limited at practice, I believe, today. They would have estimated him as limited. But just see how that progresses. Obviously, if Marv misses, I do believe Trey McBride will end up being quite important to that offense this week. He did jump Jake Ferguson for the target lead last week. I do believe it was like he's beaten him by 2 targets currently. I think he has 53. Jake Ferguson has 51, which we will get into here shortly. But my second tight end is the guy you see on the graphic. That's Tyler Warren, the rookie from the Colts. He continues to shock and amaze everyone. Drafted highly out of Penn State. He has just looked every bit of the part that he was drafted to be. He's had at least 14 PPR points in the last 3 games, which is huge at the tight end position. That just gives you an advantage on the week. You're just trying at this point when you don't get the elite guys, you want a touchdown or bust, or you're kind of getting to that 10-point mark. But if you're able to get 10, 15 points, a game as a staple there, then that's huge for you. Third here, we have Jake Ferguson. I was predicting a pretty big week for Jake Ferguson last week. It did not happen. He only had 3 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown. But that being said, he's still being involved. I do think it will be interesting to see when CD comes back just how it affects his usage in this offense. But for now, I will continue to have him here. Like I said, he's number 2 in targets on the season at the tight end position, and that is 11 targets more than the next tight end. So the next tight end 3. So you see Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson are really close together, and then the next tight end there for the season is at least double digits behind. Then you have Tucker Kraft. Yes, I know I get a lot of flack for having him in my elite tier, and after last week, I kind of debated where to put him here, right? He only had 2 catches for 43 yards, kind of salvaged his week with a touchdown. But he does play Arizona this past week, where Tyler Warren just went off. I do continue to think that Kraft is the only stable asset that this Packers offense has. You've seen weeks from Golden. There's word out that Christian Watson might finally come back. I don't think Jaden Reed is back yet. Romeo Dobbs is still consistently, but not a ton involved. He's there, kind of more of a nuisance at this point, but we'll see how it shakes out. I think the matchup against the Cardinals will be great. Um, I do want to play a game here. We played one last week in the Week 6 rankings video, and shout out to Jonathan McDowell. I think your is your name. He actually commented he played the game along. What I did was I just wanted you guys to take a guess at you know, whatever it was, pause the video, don't cheat, obviously, and then respond and see what the answer actually was. And he was the guy that actually responded. So thank you, man. I appreciate it. But this week, I've got two different ones that I want to play, and one revolves here with this stat. Tucker Craft is third in yards per reception. So we talked about last week how his yak is super high. And at the tight end position, you want those athletic guys. So if your yak is really high, you're catching the ball, you're able to get downfield with it. And so that's evidenced here by his third in yards per reception. I want you to pause the video. I want you to think of, all right, which tight ends do you think would be 1 and 2 ahead of him? Obviously, we've had some big injuries. So just take a second, pause the video, throw your guesses in the chat. Let's see how that goes, or in the comment section, I guess. Sorry, I just got off of a live stream. And then now I'll go ahead and tell you that the number one is Terrence Ferguson, the rookie for the Rams, who has had one catch on the year for 21 yards. The other one is Tyler Conklin, who has only had 5 catches on the year. And yet here you are with Tucker Craft, who, yes, he's missed like a game or two to injury. Not looked great coming back from that first week there. But he's still has the ability to, after he catches the ball, to just take off with it. And that's the reason why I continue to put him in this elite tier, is because anytime he gets space, he can take it. And so for me, I continue to have him here in my tier 1. And until he shows me otherwise, he will most likely live there. Moving on to my tier 2, I also have gotten a lot of flack for the guy on this graphic here, and that's Dallas Goedert, who comes in at my 6th spot, right behind Sam Laporta at 5. So Sam Laporta, I know people are kind of name fatigued with him. He was the tight end 4 this past week. He did have 5 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown. That being said, he is the tight end 6 on the year, right? He's been very quiet, very consistent. He's not burned you a lot of weeks, and people have just kind of forgotten about him to an extent. People have had a ton of questions about whether you play Laporta or not. I recommended it several times last week, feeling like he was going to get in the end zone. Stuff he did. So I will continue to play Sam Laporta. My only worry this week is, will Tampa Bay be able to keep up? And that's going to be the big question, right? You'll see here later on, I do have Cade Otton up in my rankings quite a bit from last week, just because of the necessity, right? You've got Egbuka, who is hurt, and we don't know if he will play. Most likely will not. Mike Evans, we still don't know where he's at with his hamstring. Chris Godwin is out still. So I think Cade Otton's going to be necessary. Yes, they have Tez Johnson and some of the other guys there filling in, but I think Cade Otton will be a big part of this role if they're going to be able to stay in this game with the Lions. And so for me, that's my only question with Sam Laporta and whether or not I play him, is, can Tampa Bay keep up with the Lions this week? And so for me, I'm not super worried about it. Like I said, Laporta is one of those guys you just kind of set and forget unless you just manage to get like a Ferguson or somebody off of waivers. So play your Sam Laporta if you have him. Going back to the graphic, I will address Dallas Goedert here at 6. He had another huge week last week, and I just can't keep him down anymore. He had 9 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown. And at this point, I don't know what to do with him. He's here in my tier 2 because I feel like the touchdowns can't be sustainable at this point. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he has 6 on the year so far. Let me double check that. 5. So I was giving him credit for one more, but he has 5 touchdowns on the year. And I kept saying, I don't know how long he can sustain. I don't know how long he can sustain. Well, he had 9 targets in week 5. He was the tight end 15 then, 11 targets in week 6, and he was the tight end 1. And he had a touchdown in each. So that's the thing is he is touchdown dependent, but he's also yardage dependent, just like everybody else is. Um, the thing with his week 5 targets that he had 9 targets, but I think he only had 3 catches. So that's the huge part here is if Dallas Goedert can continue to succeed at the rate that he is with the touchdowns, he could be a great steal from the draft this past season. You'll see I have Darren Waller here at 7. Again, not another great week. 2 catches for 12 yards, saved himself with a touchdown. Uh, the one thing that will probably save him this week is that Cleveland is the 25th best defense to play against for tight ends, or, well, I guess I said that wrong. He's the 25th best defense against tight ends, which means he's like 7 or 8, like for the tight ends to play against. Now, that being said, that defensive line with Myles Garrett, they're going to pressure Tua a lot. I do believe that will lend itself to getting the ball out a little bit quicker, which I think translates to more Waller targets this past week. I think he'll probably get off to a hotter start like he did the previous week whenever he was like 5 catches in the first quarter and a half for 78 yards and a touchdown, which was his finishing line. But that's still a good week, especially if it's just in the first half. So I think those targets will kind of tick up for him. I think he'll get back to kind of that Jonnu role this coming week here. And then here I've got a name we haven't seen in a while, and that is George Kittle. Now, keep in mind, this is assuming he plays, right? It's been estimated that he's playing this week. Shanahan has commented on it and said that he thinks he's going to play, but not been super committed to that. He was estimated as limited in practice on Wednesday, but he does play the Atlanta defense, which is the second ranked against tight ends at this point. It was first before this past week against the matchup with Buffalo, and so then they kind of flip flopped. But honestly, at this point, if George Kittle isn't back, I might just put Tonjes here as well. Tonjes has continued to thrive without everybody else there. I mean, last week, 6 catches on 7 targets for 58 yards. I mean, you could do a lot worse. He is similar, in production wise here to the next name, and that's Travis Kelce. I mean, I just told you he had 6 catches for 58 yards. Kelce last week, 6 catches for 78 yards. And the thing is yes, Kansas City is playing the Raiders, but Rashee Rice is coming back. The Raiders offense is terrible. It looks like Genty is doing something, but other than that, with Bowers being out, Geno doesn't look great. I'm curious if the Raiders can kind of keep up. And Kelce here too. He's 6th in targets, right? We were talking about targets earlier and how you had McBride and then Ferguson, and there was a pretty good gap and down to the next tight end at the tight end 3 in targets. But Kelce's still hanging around, man. He's the 6th, like I said, 6th in targets, and he just continues to produce at a high level. He's been consistent, right? We get a lot of name fatigue year in and year out, and I think people were ready to write Kelce off. Yes, he hasn't always looked the best, but he ends up with good stat lines by the time you get to the end of it. And so for me, I'm willing to throw Kelce back out there in my tier 2. He's the tight end 5 overall. So that goes to show you kind of where everything stacks up at the tight end position. Going into tier 3 here, I've mentioned Cade Otton before, and you'll see another name that I'm actually really excited to talk about. So Cade Otton here at 10. That is just out of respect for Baker Mayfield, who is playing at an all-world level right now. Got MVP chance last week, and they were actually talking about how Tez Johnson, after the game, they heard the MVP chance, and he was like, I haven't really done anything so far. And everybody was like, yeah, that's because it's for Baker. Like, he is just that good. And so I think he'll feed Cade Otton as long as nobody else is there. I hope, obviously, maybe Mike Evans or somebody's there to take some of the focus away. But like I said, going against the Lions, I just really hope they can keep up. But his opportunity should be pretty good here this week. And then the next name, speaking of opportunity, is going to be Harold Fannin. You saw it last week. David Njoku went down with a knee injury, and Harold Fannin kind of just took over it, right? He had 7 catches on 10 targets for 81 yards. It is a good defensive matchup. They play Miami this week, which is the 27th best against tight end, and he's still number one in missed tackles forced. He is an athletic freak, guys. And if he's going to get this entire workload, where last week that was my thing last week, the game that I had you play was what was the route participation for them, and him and Njoku 0.3 percentage points apart, right? So I think this will only lend itself to more Harold Fannin involvement. I think he will tick up here. And if he has another good week, he could easily be in tier 2 next week. Then you'll see my last two names here, Kyle Pitts and Hunter Henry. Neither of them really had a great game last week. Both had 3 catches. Pitts had 18 yards and then 27 yards for Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry, you're just looking at the rotation between Diggs and Boutte having these week in and week out things. You'll just have to see, what that continues to be. Drake May still looks phenomenal. So I'm willing to take a shot at a touchdown there against Tennessee, who is the 7th ranked against tight ends. And that's probably just because they can't put up enough points for teams to have to continue throwing against them. So I will once again put Hunter Henry in there as like a touchdown dependent starter and just kind of go with it. Pitts, also, like I said, not a good week, but they did win against Buffalo, who, like I said, is now the number one defense against tight ends. And that being said, there was a ton of target consolidation in the Falcons offense last week. On Monday night, if I'm not mistaken, I was listening to the broadcasters, and they basically said that, like, out of everybody, the only real targets that were on the team was Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan. Maybe Algier had a few, but like none of the other receivers were really doing anything. I don't think Darnell Mooney played. If he did, he was non-existent. And so you love the target consolidation in fantasy, and so at that point, he still gets to stay here in my tier 3. And so that's my top 3 tiers there, guys. Those are the guys that like I look at as week in, week out. They could be the tight end, like a tight end one, and really have a chance to be more than just tight end dependent or touchdown dependent. So those are the guys that I would be looking at this week that maybe will give you a little bit more production outside of touchdowns. That being said, we'll move to my tier 4, who these guys are more touchdown dependent, or maybe they're on a bad offense, or maybe they're just dart throws at this point. And you'll see some other good names on here that I want to bring up, right? So down in tier 4 now, I do have Zach Ertz here at 14. Going against Dallas, he had 6 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown this past week. I've had him higher in weeks prior, but I like all the guys ahead of him just a little bit more. They will need to score points. We'll see if CD is back. Terry is still out as well, so I do think that still lends itself to Zach Ertz being more involved. But I'm not super thrilled with everything I'm seeing from the Washington offense as far as Ertz usage goes currently. You'll see I have Michael Mayer here actually at 15. I don't want to dive in too crazy, but that being said, Bowers is not expected to play again, I don't believe. And this past week, Michael Mayer didn't have a great stat line, but he was usable, right? And so I think he will have to do something in order for the Raiders to keep up with Kansas City. So for me, I'm going to throw him out there and hope it works, and maybe he just falls in the end zone, right? Then you have Mason Taylor. Talk about a terrible offense, guys. Mason Taylor last week was atrocious. 1 catch for 12 yards. And I say that to say this. I'm just throwing that game out. They're getting ready to play Carolina. Carolina is the 31st ranked defense against tight ends, which means they're the second best to play against. And the reason I say I'm throwing it out is because of 2 reasons. One, Garrett Wilson's most likely out. I know he's definitely doubtful to play. But also 2, last week Justin Fields only had 45 yards of passing. Like, that's terrible. You're never going to win a game like that. And I think it only has to get better. It can't get much worse, right? And so For me, I don't know. I think he'll be the number one target this week with Garrett Wilson out. I think you could do worse for sure. And so for me, I'm willing to throw Mason Taylor out there again after what wasn't a great week this week. Popping my graphic back up here, you'll see I have Chico Conquo next, and he's the graphic here. And I just want to bring him up, right? So it's interesting conversation with Chig on the Titans offense. Offense is terrible, right? Um, no one's really excited to play anyone from the Tennessee offense currently, and he's not doing a ton, right? He's the tight end 21 on the season, but he had 6 catches for 46 yards last week, which could be much worse, right, at the tight end position. And if you're in PPR leagues, obviously that means he's over 10 points. So another thing, I talked about the athletes, right, at the tight end position. That's the guys you wanted. Chig is actually number 2 in missed tackles forced with 9, right behind Harold Fannin with 11. Something to just kind of keep in mind. And now this is where I wanted to play the second game of the week. You can put it in the same comment if you want to as the first one, or you can just make another one. That's fine too. Um, Tell me what you think the point spread is between Chig and Zach Ertz on the season. I will go ahead and I will give you where they are ranked currently. Currently, Zach Ertz is the tight end 12, and Chig is currently, like I said, the tight end 21. So 9 spots at the tight end position. I want you to pause the video. Tell me what you think the point differential is between the two's fantasy points on the year. Now that you've done that, I'm going to tell you that it's actually only 16 points. And you're like, 16 points and 9 spots. Guys, it's the tight end position. This is what I'm talking about every year. You get these guys that are touchdown dependent, and that's really the difference between Zach Ertz and Chig, right? I'm going to read my stat sheet here. So Chig, so far this year, has 23 catches on 30 targets for 218 yards with no touchdowns, right? Like I said, Tennessee offense, terrible. But as you can see, 23 catches, 218 yards. He's still being involved. Okay. Fast forward to Zach Ertz, tight end 12 on the year. He has 20 catches for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. So you can see he has less yardage, less catches, but 3 touchdowns makes up that difference. So that's what we're talking about here. There's not a huge gap between tight end 12 and tight end 21. And I just don't want people to have this misconception that, oh, because I have a top 12 tight end, I'm doing great. No, you need to be looking at, all right, who can I get to play? Because it's going to be a touchdown dependent week. Who has the best chance to score? I still put Chig here because he does have the production to at least be on the field. He's athletic enough to get in the end zone. And if by some chance he's the one that gets in the end zone when Tennessee scores their 7 or we'll say 14 points, would be generous. Hopefully that's the case. Then he'll move up the rankings for that week specifically. But these guys, like I said, more touchdown dependence than nothing. AJ Barner's down here, somebody I highlighted last week as being touchdown dependent, and once again kind of proved it. He did have 3 catches for 71 yards, but no touchdowns. So that's kind of where he had some yardage, he had a big catch, but before that, he was hurting your team drastically. So I warned everybody last week, but was telling you, if you think he gets in the end zone, you can play him. They do play Houston this week, which is the 4th best defense against tight ends. So tough defense. He's a streamer. He's still the 3rd target on the offense with Sam Darnold, who is still firing on all cylinders. Him and JSN are tearing it up. So just if you're looking for a touchdown, AJ Barner could be your guy. You could definitely do much worse. I have TJ Hawkinson here back from bye. And then you'll see Taysom Hill on here. There's no Jawan Johnson on the list, and it's not for the reason you think. That's kind of what I wanted to bring up. Taysom makes it on this list, not because he was used as a receiver, right? So I wanted to go back and look at how much each tight end was used, and Taysom literally had no catches, no targets, and no receiving yards, obviously, and no touchdowns for a receiver. The only reason he had any fantasy points was because he ran a touchdown in. And so that's the thing with Taysom Hill that people are kind of worried about. People are like, oh, he's used as a tight end. He's going to take away Juwan Johnson's snaps. No, not really. He lines up everywhere. He can line up at the running back position. He can line up as the quarterback like you did, run a touchdown in. And so I looked at a snap percentage breakdown for all three tight ends now. So you've got Taysom Hill, who he had 21% of the snaps. You had Foster Moreau, the other tight end that came back, who was at 36% of the snaps. And Juwan Johnson was still at 71% of the snaps. Now, yes, you obviously would only want one tight end to be relevant. We all hope for that. I still think Juwan Johnson's going to be involved, but with 3 bad weeks in a row and people still having the concerns, I'll take him off of my top 24 for now, but do not be surprised if he has another good week and people are like, wait, I thought Taysom Hill scored and he was on your rankings because he was taking Juwan Johnson's workload. No, that's not the case. He's just being used in multiple spots. So just wanted everybody to be aware of that. Popping my rankings up, we'll speed through these last few. Evan Ingram, Oronde Gadsden, Theo Johnson, and Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith doesn't make a lot of these ranking videos, but he does play the Bengals this week. So he has a chance to be able to do something there. Now, keep in mind, if that's the case, you are playing your tight end on Thursday night this week. So just be wary of that. I do want to bring up Gadsden. He had another good week. He had a good week, I believe it was week 2 or week 3, where it looked like a breakout was coming. And I advised everybody, is like, you can pick him up, you can stash him, but don't play him. I want to see it more than 1 week. And he came out and he hurt you again that next week. And so I will caution you again. This is his second time. He's got 7 catches for 68 yards this past week. He's getting ready to go up against Indy, who Trey McBride had a tight end 2 week on. So I think he's got the matchup. It will depend on if QJ is still hurt. Keenan Allen has become less involved. So we'll see how it shakes out. He has the opportunity to do so, but start at your own risk, guys. So I do want to point out, like I said, Keenan was trending down a little bit. 29 routes for Keenan versus 32 for Gadsden. So Gadsden's already running more routes than Keenan. Just something to kind of monitor as we go forward. And then he's not on this list, but I want you to keep an eye out for a player, and that's Tyler Higbee. I'm just not convinced that it's just him so far. But with Puka being out, he's going to have to step up. He had 4 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown last week, and so this week they take on Jacksonville, which is the 12th ranked defense against tight ends, and so he could be of use, guys. Right, so just monitor that. If you need if you have an extra spot on your bench and you want to pick up another tight end, maybe Higbee's the play. Maybe he gets more involved with Puka out. I know Coach was talking about Jordan Whittington. As far as waivers go, he's been involved when Puka's been out, but we'll just see. We'll see how the targets shake out. Other than that, though, that's my rankings for this week. Comment on the video, and then subscribe if you haven't already. We've got a good amount of people that watch the videos that aren't subscribed, so we do these every week. We have positional rankings from other members of the Face Off Sports Network. Matt does his running backs. We've got some defense, kickers, quarterbacks, wide receivers. All those are done on this channel. So feel free to tap in each week. And I look forward to seeing you next week, and peace out.